Alana here from Wilderness Torah. I am the Community Programs Manager and excited to welcome you all here for our Sukkot Virtual Village series in collaboration with Urban Adamah. And this series is happening throughout the 7 days of Sukkot, and we are offering a diverse class series of embodied learning, text study, spiritual practice, and nature connection. And we are very excited to have Rabbi Lynn here with us today. I just want to let all of you know, if you have missed some of our past classes, these are being recorded, and they are being processed in 3 to 5 days after the class is. And so we will be sending those out to you. And I'm going to share Rabbi Lynn's bio in the chat, and I will pass it along to you. We're very excited to learn with you today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Shalom Aleichem. I didn't want to take time with my bio. So it's really good to be here. Hag Sameach. Yes. in our virtual reality. Today is a wonderful day to think about the Sukkah, the temporary structure, which harkens back to the Mishkan, that movable sacred lodge, tent, that was said to have journeyed with the people. Some say it journeyed as sacred clouds over and below and all around the people. So as a kind of spiritual cloud. That was, I think, Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, if I remember correctly. And some people said that indeed it was actually a physical sukkah, which the people built, and it sheltered them. And so this holiday is in remembrance of that time. And remembrance is not only thinking about the past, but remembrance is a call to enact something in the present. The Mishkan, after the Sukkah, the Mishkan became the more permanent sacred tent that was nonetheless transportable, and it followed the Israelites on their journey. And there was even sacred people from the Levite clans to carry it. And given that we are all of Israel is a Kohen, like many things in our tradition, the Mishkan became a story, a mythic story, and a place of imagination, and a way to frame core values of our tradition. I love painting the Mishkan, and I lived much of my life in New Mexico, and which is Indian country. Albuquerque is surrounded by, there are 19 nations in New Mexico altogether, 19 Indian nations, and Albuquerque is surrounded by different pueblos. Isleta in the south and Sandias in the north, and there's pueblos that go all the way up to Santa Fe, and then if you go west, there's Laguna, where apparently there was a German Jewish family of Gottliebs, Amma Gottlieb, that lived in Laguna, and so almost immediately when I went out there, I was kind of adopted as a Laguna Gottlieb. And my uncle, Richard Gottlieb, a gay man who was on his way to Hollywood and got caught in a snowstorm and was dug out by San Juan Indians and lived on the San Juan pueblo where I was conceived when my parents visited him. So the Mishkan for me has this very deep root, and it is amplified and given a whole other dimension for me because of my experience in New Mexico. So I want to honor indigenous people, especially those that I've known in New Mexico and here. In New Mexico, the Zia, the sign, which by the way, the person who took that out of the tribe was banned from ever living in the tribe again, but it has these 3 symbols, which are like the sun. And of course, my Jewish mind looking at that was immediately, as it sort of recalled the 12 tribes that were said to be around the Mishkan. So what I'm going to share with you today is this frame. It's a spiritual frame, like the sfirot are kind of a frame that people use to think about spiritual things. The Mishkan is similar in that way. If you have a question, please put it in the chat, and I know Ilana will help me with that because it's hard for me to check the chat and to talk to you at the same time. So before we begin, I want you to you can either make a square for the four quadrants, which will have the 4 sacred images, which these are not necessarily for you to copy. So for now, just you can either make a square, or you might be more, you might be more inclined to make it circular and diagonal. This is another image of the Mishkan frame. So sometimes when I'm making it, and the symbols are associated with each direction, which I'll get into, but I wanted to show you just how generative it has been for me personally. Or you might want to do a circle and a square, who knows? This is, you can see the circle, and in the middle are the 3 pieces, each tribe, there are 3 tribes on each side of the Mishkan. And there are also traditional colors, which I'll go into, but don't worry about that, and animals. And today we're just going to really focus on the symbols. So I want you to create, you might say, the frame of your sacred lodge, what that might look like for you. Do I have a picture of you mean the Mishkan? Okay. So here we go. First, I want to put the Mishkan in a values frame for you, because I feel like having values at the core, which our tradition does, allows us to understand spirituality in a different kind of way. And also, values determine the choices that we make. We make choices according to our values. So our tradition arose in a context, and that context was we were disposable people at the mercy of empire, or at the rod of empire. A disposable people, meaning we had no intrinsic value except to build the storage grains of the great pharaonic empire, which also created environmental chaos because empires take land and loot people for the purpose of building riches and feeding the needs of a small class of people. This is our first story, right? And then there's a whole militaristic policing that goes with that. And usually it's in a patriarchal context. So we come into this world as a people, as the disposable people in the context of this empire. And we have a different vision of the world that could be. And that vision, first of all, centers the voices of those who are directly impacted by violence. Their story, their vision, their wisdom tradition is centered as the spiritual, as the sacred text, if you like, through which the divine emerges. And in this vision, there's these 12 tribes around a sacred center. And a new treaty is written, and that is a treaty of mutual aid, the core value of mutual aid, where there is, this is of course the ideal vision, where there's not a class system, but everyone sitting around this circle receives. And if you can see over where my fingers sort of, oh no, this way, yeah, right there, that is my vision of the tribes. That's another Mishkan drawing. You see black, white, red, and green, which are the Kabbalistic colors. And then each of the tribes that's around has a kind of spiritual gift that it carries. So for instance, Reuven is a curandera. You know, this is the curandera because the symbol of the mandrake. So this kind of healing curanderismo. And each of these tribes is known to have a specific piece of this mutual aid, a specific wisdom of this mutual aid. And so the Mishkan represents this new vision of how to organize spiritual life. And so there are 4 sacred symbols within it. And today I just happened to draw this quadrant. Oh, I don't have a picture of the indigenous one because it's not, but you can look up the flag of New Mexico. So in the east is the Mazbeach, and that means altar. First, now I'm just going to name the symbols. This, by the way, is a fire. It's a fire wheel, which is kind of cool. That's a whole other story. But in the south is a 7-branch menorah. In the west are the tablets, the luchot, or the Torah. And in the north is the table of 12 breads. Can you see that? Just shake your head if you can kind of. Okay, cool. If at any time you want me to stop and, you know, give you guys a breath, let me know. You're welcome to start drawing these images. Each image represents a spiritual pathway that aligns with the values of mutual aid. And aligns with the value that every human being has dignity across all bars, meaning incarcerated spaces, and borders. So every human being has dignity is a core value, and mutual aid. These are the core values that influence what this new sacred shrine, this humble sacred shrine that influences this idea of what a gathering space looks like for free people.
There's a question here. Are these always the specific symbols?
Yes. These symbols are in the Bible, in the Torah, and they're actually described at length, in a surprising way, truly. But I will admit that my visioning of them, it comes from this long experience of dealing with text and tradition and my own geography. So a mazbeach represents the place where a person comes and makes an offering. So before you enter the sacred shrine, you give something, put something on the altar. Sometimes there's washing of hands. That's a purification piece. But the main thing is making a giveaway. We have that tradition as part of tzedakah. But this is because you cannot enter a sacred space if you haven't sort of repaired the social fabric first. That is why before we start any holiday, we give tzedakah. If we really amplify this idea, it is this idea that you've showed up for justice and you've held yourself accountable, and the community has held itself accountable, and it has gone through a process of tshuva. It has gone through a process of actual repair of wounds, because this represents the alternative sacred space to the empire. And for an alternative space to be erected, it has to begin with, if you like, reparations, giving back, just giving, truma, all of this. So this is the first fire. You can imagine the elders sitting there, as you pass through the threshold into the sacred space. And I have to say that for me, this has been showing up for directly impacted people my whole life in their space, usually in the street. When they are expressing, we're being harmed and we want people to show up for this, this, and this, then I show up. And that is one of the reasons I have really good relationships with so many different communities. And I feel like this is sort of the sacrifice that we make. This is the offering that we make. Menorah represents this idea of human dignity. Let it all shine, the purified oil that is hidden away, this tree of life. What are the things in our life that help make us feel beautiful? Beautiful inside, beautiful outside. What is the context of our dignity? What makes us feel welcome? What allows all our lights to shine? And this is why this is often used as a sphera, as a rainbow symbol. You can see the the rainbow colors in the center of the flame.
Pat, did you want to ask your question?
No, everybody had, I mean,
I was just,
nature has its own methods, but I'm talking about the human community right now because,
okay.
yeah. But we'll get to our relation. We can get to our relationship with the natural world in a sec. But definitely, this is part of it. This establishes, like in this one, there's this sort of shomer Adamah as the pieces of this. Being good stewards of creation obviously extends beyond humanity. And for those indigenous people who are stewards of the waters, and many indigenous people all over the world, they are telling us that we have to be better stewards of creation because it's impacting their lives. Absolutely. So really, what are the ethical protocols that hold this up? And that's where the mitzvot are. The ethical protocols. And this is where equity comes in. Again, the foundation of dignity is having equity, an equitable circumstance, not to be a disposable human. And so our tradition places a lot of focus on equity and gives us a whole process of repair called tshuva, which is a 5-step process that includes guarantee of non-repeat of the harm and the paying of reparations. But perhaps the most essential piece, and these are all bound together, they're part of a sacred home. The essential piece is the shulchan, the 12 breads, which is about radical inclusion and radical hospitality, the creation of welcome, the suspension of hostility, the creation of safe space, the sharing of abundance, being good guests and being good hosts. Now, this is the ethics and the vision of the Mishkan. And it is a sort of teaching method. There's many things that go with each one of these quadrants, but right now I just want you to feel how beautiful it is to think of summing up Jewish tradition through this teaching of the Sacred Lodge, and how so much of what we can say about Jewish tradition can happen through the teaching of the Sacred Lodge. In this first piece too, I meant to say that I believe that we have the first human rights holiday, Shabbat, that corresponds to this idea that there is no disposable human, so that workers deserve rest and people deserve time to be resilient. And this is woven into the very fabric of creation. So there are ceremonial pieces to all of these. So this is it in a nutshell. And perhaps we can open up, and I really invite each person to share a little reflection about if this spoke to you, if you have a question. So we can go to gallery view and go from there. Maybe I can call on a person. I want to, in honor of equity, I want us to think about having, about a minute or two each so that everybody has space. So even before you ask or think, we'll just take a minute to breathe, and you can look at your drawing or your notes and see what emerged for you.
Will you say something a little more about color?
Color?
Yeah, I know you gave the Kabbalist colors, but are there other Jewish colors? I mean, there certainly are. In the Torah, they're not the ones you mentioned.
No. We are a nation of artists and poets. And so people have a vision that they impose on, it's kind of talking to the oral tradition talks to the written tradition and amplifies it. So I didn't want to use black. I wanted to use purple. That was not a symbolic choice. It just maybe an aesthetic choice. It was not quite black. Somebody else might make a different decision. But I tried to keep the basic Kabbalistic view or the Midrashic view of red, green, black, and white, which I find, and which this is sometimes rainbow for me, which I find so fascinating, given that it's the color of so many liberation flags, also, like the Palestinian flag is this color. I think, I could speculate on these colors and what they mean, but of course these are not stable meanings. These are symbolic, and so they're very fluid. So I don't get too attached to them in that way, but I enjoy working with them, In this one, I didn't follow the traditional color scheme at all. Because here I was going more for the Mishkan as a ceremonial wheel, which it also is for me. So today I'm giving you kind of the justice wheel of the Mishkan. There's also the ancestral wheel, and it kind of goes on. All right. Would you? I'm not going to call on Pat, but Barbara, you are. I will eventually. Barbara, you are welcome to call on someone that you see. Oh, and if you have a picture that you want to hold up, please do. Oh, it's wonderful not to get too attached, and it's beautiful to share. But you don't have to, of course. But would you like to call on someone? But you have to unmute yourself.
Well, I would, now you can hear Paco too. Is anybody interested in sharing?
Just call on someone, and they can
call on someone. Okay, Becca.
Hi, Becca. Just wave to us, Becca, so we know who you are. Thank you. Anything that came up for you, or
I almost was gonna raise my hand, so thanks for calling. Yeah, I'm just so at the beginning of my journey back into my spirituality as a Jewish woman that, I don't have much of a foundation. So every time I do one of these, it's for the first time. But I love this. And I can't wait to work on mine. And I resonated with all the 4 sections, you know, something in each 4 section. Like, I love the balance in being good hosts and being good guests. And yeah, I just, you know, it's hard for me to articulate anything, honestly. But I do like it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Becca. Being good hosts and being good guests is such a profound part for me of this pathway.
I also loved the whole idea of preparing social fabric and the teshuvah and before entering a sacred space, because we've just emerged from that part of the year. And yeah.
Would you like to call on someone?
Sure. How about Faye?
And Faye, just wave to us so we know who you are.
Oh, that's my pronoun. My name is Fragel.
Fragel. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually, maybe I missed it when you were going through the 4 images, but I got stuff about the menorah and the 12 breads, but I was wondering if you could just say a little bit more about the fireball and the tablets, like what they are connected to.
Yeah. This is a fire altar, and it stood in the eastern quadrant of the sacred lodge that's described in the wilderness as a place of communal gathering and a place where the Shekhinah would come and reveal to the people. The divine presence was revealed to the people. And so the altar, this offering altar, this fire altar, is a beacon to invite people to surrender something before they enter the lodge. Much like tzedakah, before we begin a ceremony, we engage in the protocol of giveaway, which is just giving, meaning that this is not charity. It is in order to keep our relationships well balanced and grounded in equity. One of the offerings, I think, in this time is getting our pronouns right and making sure that when we do enter a space that we share the pronouns that we would like to be called, invited to do that. So thank you for that. That feels very much like you have to do this sort of to get into the rest of the, and it's not, I mean, people are invited to, so that people feel good and feel safe. And I think you asked me, did you ask me for this piece too?
Oh yeah, the tablets.
This,
I missed
you
that
know,
one.
the Torah is the house of the commandments or the mitzvot. I like to think of commandments as protocols, as a kind of series of behaviors. Some of them are more ritualistic, and those are in a way particular to Jewish people. Some of them, like so many, blowing the shofar as a protocol for the new year to wake us up, you know, to hearing our hearts. That's kind of particular to us. Then there are other protocols like what is fit to use and what is not fit to use. That's the question of keeping kosher. Partly which are particular to us, but they raise universal questions like, if we're going to use an animal, How do we kill it so it feels the least amount of pain? That's a protocol question. Is killing an insect kosher? You know, that's a protocol question. That's a mitzvah question. And what is so beautiful about this is that no detail is too small because nothing is a disposable life. And so these are serious questions, or questions of life and death. Does that help?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thanks. I could show what I drew so far.
Hold it a little closer. You can't. Oh, where did you go? Oh, there. Thank you.
And yeah, when you shared about the importance of doing tzedakah, tshuva, reparations before entering sacred space, that made me think about how, like, in my own practice, I don't think of only certain spaces like a synagogue as having the potential to be sacred. So then I wrote, every space where we enact justice becomes sacred, because what you said made me think that.
We'll give you a little finger twist.
Thanks for inviting me to share.
Are you ready to call on someone?
Sure. How about Pat, since you're to my right?
I really like, can you hear me?
Yes.
I really like your focus on looking at our traditions, our rituals, and our the things, the menorah and the tablets, as looking as gateways to our values. So that's super important. I like that focus and the fluidity of the symbols. I have a question though. You know, that's what I guess I raised it early on. We're looking at right now, our relationships to our human relationships to each other, our relationships to each other as community, one-to-one or as community, or in relation to an outside power, a human power.
Well, that I'll leave up to you.
What I'm wondering about though, well, you were talking about, I don't mean outside power, transcendental or spiritual. I'm talking about, you know, like Rome, that's what
I see. Okay.
Still humans.
The empire, the power of empire.
Yeah, power of empire. But what I was wondering about, since you said that you have a lot of connections with indigenous people, Native Americans, and you're in New Mexico. I'm wondering, do you see what you're looking at as our indigenous roots, and as an indigenous people, as Jews, as these tribes, do you see the same sense of being part of the natural world, the non-human world, in the same way that I see indigenous people telling me that's how they see themselves in the world? In other words,
I understand your question.
Yeah. So do you see that in our heritage and our traditions?
I understand your question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Those are one is a question of whether I think, you know, do I see Jewish people as indigenous people? And to that I would say no. I do not. I mean, everybody has been, and we certainly have a long history in Eretz Yisrael, and we are principally a diaspora people as well. Like, we are not exclusively one or the other. And I think that indigenous, when used in the context of Israel, can be very political. And I'm not ready to, go into that conversation at the moment. But let me just say, for those of us living on Turtle Island, who, and which is quite a number of us, living in the United States, we are not indigenous to Turtle Island, but we have made our homes here. And so this, as a diaspora people, this raises a lot of different questions for us on how we create good relationships here on Turtle Island with the people who have been here and have experienced, settler colonialism from us, and issues around racism and slavery. These are the things that we have to wrestle with here on Turtle Island. As far as our relationship to creation, yes, of course, but I believe if we are treating each other as having dignity, that will impact how we treat creation. And I believe that, integrated into Shabbat is this idea that we take a day and we stop being consumers, and we try to rekindle our relationship of balance with the natural world. We went so far in the past as not to light fires, and not to consume, but to try to see what our place is in the natural world. And there's a lot of protocols about kindness to animals, not killing insects, and down to little details that teach us about having a good relationship, being Shomerei Adamah, being stewards of this planet, because we have the power to have such an impact, as we well know, on the natural world. Hello, we're in the middle of pandemic and fire. That our relationship is how we treat things is critical, and we can use our tradition to help guide us. And there's a lot to be said about the global Mishkan that's happening in the world right now, as different peoples are bringing wisdom traditions together. And my principle is always to be led in any area of struggle by those who are carrying the burden of the harm, because they will know best what it means to move into a more transformed and healed relationship. So thank you. If you have anything to hold up, you can do that. And would you like to call on somebody?
Let's see. Ilana, do you have a question?
Well, just call on somebody, Pat.
I'll call on Ilana.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Sure.
You can also just say what sparked in your imagination. It doesn't have to be the whole thing,
Yeah. Well, I'm really loving what everyone's sharing. And I really love what you shared, Fragel, like going in every space that we enter. I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but it was really beautiful, like is a space of justice. And that's really powerful. And I'm also, appreciating Shabbat and how thinking about all the farm workers here in California who have been harvesting food in terrible fires and horrible smoke that no one should be ingesting. And so thinking about rest and like what does like sacred rest mean, and how do we uplift that in our world in a time that feels in a time that feels really hard. So that's what I'm sitting with.
Well, thank you for sharing that reality. And if you have anything to hold up, you're welcome to. And could you call in someone so we can get everybody's voices in here before we go?
Wendy, you're invited to share if you'd like.
I actually had a question, a Sukkot question for you, a lulav question for you. Is that okay to ask?
Yeah, I'll try to make it very quick.
Yes. Yep, I put it in the chat. It just that occurred to me, since I always get a lulav with a kind of a snappy sound, that maybe shaking a lulav could be similar to a Native American rattle, kind of a dispersing negativity, which I was trying to get rid of this morning with all the negativity around us. So would there be similarities?
Well, you know, there are just so many Native cultures. That's the first thing. So it's pretty hard to generalize when, in a broad sense, about Native Americans. In New Mexico, one of the things I love is people dance with plants in their hands, you know, and I'm not really given permission to share any meaning. But you can see if you go to the pueblos and they dance, they're dancing with plants in their hands. And in our own tradition, you know, all our holidays are dance holidays. That's the other piece about the Mishkan. Chag itself, the word chag is around dance, and living in New Mexico is like, hello, there's 14 words for dance in the Torah, 14. It's like, what are we doing sitting on our tuchas when we pray, you know? So Sukkot is also this original, you know, with a lulav, you can more visibly see this kind of, this tribal aspect of our culture. We have a tribal aspect of our culture. We have ceremonial time. That's a very tribal aspect of our culture. And it was the Jewish Pueblo, you know, the conversations I've had in New Mexico and here, there's a lot of wonderful shared things, including dance. Like I taught my community how to dance, klezmer and Sephardic dance. And one time we were out protecting a sacred area from a road, and we'd been out there for most of the day at the invitation of Native people. And at one point, after, you know, dancing, they shared dances, and did a lot of dancing. And one of the elders asked me if our people knew any dances. And so we got up and we did the Berke dance. It's a 1,000-year-old dance, you know. And it was it was just one of those moments, you know, where I was like, oh my gosh. And, you know, I knew they wouldn't steal it. They're not going to take it from us or anything. And we, in turn, we have strict protocols about not using Native things. It's just the way it was out there. And so, yeah, it is a pretty fab conversation, fabulous engagement. And here too, you know, protecting the shell mound on 4th Street. I'm sure some of you have been involved in that. Yeah. So who would you like to call on, Wendy? How about Sharon? You haven't gotten to speak yet.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking about the 4 elements of fire, earth, wind, and okay. So anyway, I was thinking about balancing, and this is like the holiday of balancing various different elements in our lives: the intellectually, the spiritual, the physical, the emotional. So it's also in the sign of Libra, which is also the sign of balance. So those are the ideas that I was thinking about, just balancing in the ecology, balancing in the human sphere, balancing. But this is the holiday of balancing all these different elements and uniting them together.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Did you draw any of that?
No, I'm not an artist, but I was just thinking about it.
All right. Well, thank you. Who else? Whose face we can't see? Would anyone either Julie or Maria like to speak? Even though we can't see you.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'll speak. I'm sitting in my sukkah right now.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and I am making a drawing because I'm an artist, but it wasn't anything related to specific to what you're talking about, although now I kind of feel like it is.
Oh, cool.
So it's like a charred branch, a burnt branch. I'm right near the Angeles National Forest that's on fire, and then like a bone, and then this rope. And this is part of a bigger project I'm working on, but the idea is that human tree forms are connected and somehow linking them together.
Beautiful.
So thank you for this. This is so beautiful. I'm learning things I've never known about Sukkot.
Thank you. Maria, would you like to share anything? I see Sukkot is the hag. Yes, the elder. The elder. Yes, the crone. Well, we have 6 more minutes.
Wait a minute, I want to explain that. It's not the elder, the crone. The rabbis referred to Sukkot as the Chag.
Oh,
It is
Chag. See,
the
my brain went
big,
into a feminist.
big Chag. It's the biggest Chag there is.
Yes.
It's the one that's going to be at the end of time, and it's
Yes.
for the whole world, not just us and all that kind of stuff. But before we go, I just want to quickly show what I made tiny drawings. And I don't know how to fill in all this, but I wanted to show you the shape I arrived at. Can you see that? I don't. Can you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it divided into 3 pretty well. And I wanted to also make sure that brown is in all of my pictures because brown is the earth. And that's what I just want to show that. Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Barbara. Yes, it's you know, each of us is a letter in the Torah, and without our own sharing of our particular vision, we would not have a whole idea of what's possible and what's beautiful and you know, what's happening and all of that. So I encourage you to draw. You know, yes, Julie.
I've been curious because I've been doing research around this. Is there any organization that is Jews and indigenous communities working together? Is there a specific org?
Yes, there are Jews on Ohlone land in the Bay Area, and there are many Jewish people who are supporting native sovereignty, and that is happening around the country in different ways because indigenous people have different issues in different places. And so there are many Jewish people involved in supporting indigenous issues. Here in Berkeley, supporting Jews supporting Ohlone land looks like encouraging other Jews to pay a shumi tax. This is a tax on living here, and which you can find if you look under Ohlone, O-H-L, I spelled it in my O-H-L-O-N-E. So yes, there are, and I think you'll find more that, like in the sort of level of the Mazbeach, that directly impacted people are asking us to pay this tax before they, instead of dialogue. Dialogue is not that helpful to directly impacted people in any circumstance, unless it is accompanied by a system of accountability. Otherwise, it's just re-traumatizing. There is nothing more traumatizing than sharing your story or your tradition, which is, for a lot of people, has been looted to begin with. Massive looting of Black people's culture. I know we have experienced this, and so forth. So in approaching Indigenous people, there are protocols to follow locally. I had the pleasure to go to Standing Rock. I mean, the honor to go to Standing Rock, and it was kind of a wilderness tour thing. I think I was inside the village for about 5 minutes, and I hear Rabbi Lynn, and it turns out there's a shtetl going on in Standing Rock, and there were Jewish people. Zelig was there, and others. Asher was there, and a whole bunch of people from Linka Flegel on the East Coast. There was this little very informal shtetl, and so I ended up actually sleeping in a bed with a fire. I mean, and then the elders that were there were very interested that younger people treated me as an elder, and so I got to participate in some ceremony in very special ways. I was so impacted by the gathering of the tribes in that moment and what they were asking for. And to me, that's about protecting the earth in specific sites. And so Sukkot can be a time to figure out what that looks like in your own local arena. Yeah.
Awesome. Yay.
Yay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Should we shake our diaspora lulavs in all the directions? Woo.
I missed the Wilderness Torah session that was about local lulavs. And I'm at sea.
Oh, well, it's really easy. I do this with the kids. I'm director of youth and family programming at Chochmat Lev. And so we just went in our backyards or in the neighborhood and picked 3 beautiful plants and tied them together. And luckily there's like lemons abound all over the place, right? And so most people had a Meyer lemon, and we used our own local plants to make a lulav.
Yeah, I can do that, and I feel more supported in doing that. Hearing you say that, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, everybody was doing it this year. It's kind of cool. It's amazing. It was one of the blessings, the Hidur Mitzvah blessing for this year.
Beautiful. Thank you so
I'm going to put my 2 things in the chat, just if you want to get a hold of me. That is the easiest way to get a hold of me. And I have a recent, I think it's .com. I have a recent website. You can also friend me on Facebook if you want, and which is where I post a lot about different things. Been lovely seeing all of you and sharing this time with you.
Thank you, Rabbi Lynn. It was so beautiful, and I learned a lot, and just appreciate your wisdom and your presence. And yeah, Becca, just so you know, all of our sessions are being recorded. So in like 3 to 5 days, that local lulav session will be sent to you. And thanks.
You know, I was trying to put my lulav together yesterday and I was looking for the recording, and I know sometimes it takes you guys a few days. It's okay.
Awesome. Yes, well, thank you all for being here and being a part of our virtual community, and hope you all continue to have a beautiful Sukkot and have meaningful meals with friends and family. So,
Woo. Bye, everyone. Chag Sameach.